Well, the League of Women Voters of the Tennessee Valley teamed up with local groups to make each vote count, and they made a stop at the Boys and Girls Club of North Alabama. Our Kenesha Dees has more on why leaders say there's strength in numbers and why the details are crucial when registering to vote absentee.
All hands on deck here as multiple organizations work together in the Cavalry Hills community to get people registered to vote.
We have been holding drive-through voter clinics before. This is the first time we are hosting a joint drive-up and walk-up clinic.
Leaders say some of the common issues include missing identification from voters who use the pandemic as an excuse to vote absentee.
If they're using excuse number 2, which is the one that's been approved, then they need to provide an identification copy with their application.
The Alabama Nonviolent Offender Organization also making sure people know whether or not they're eligible to vote by checking one's record or history.
The men and women that have been incarcerated and they are now released and trying to enter back into society, want them to know, if they do qualify to register, because their vote is important. Even outside of events, we still speak with them if we have questions as far as voting rights.
Leaders say the partnership helps further reach underserved communities.
Cavalry Hills is the heart of the greater Huntsville community, and it has a demographic that we are trying to address with our initiative.
We understand the struggle that women had to gain their right to vote, and then us as a African-American fraternity, we understand the struggle that blacks had to gain the right to vote.
And the League of Women Voters of the Tennessee Valley plan to host another voter drive-up with the seminal Boys and Girls Club on September 26th. Putting the Valley first, Kenesha Dees, WZDX News.